It was meant to be a routine takeoff, a journey that had begun like countless others. Two Boeing 747s, two massive aircraft, both with hundreds of passengers aboard, lifting into the sky from a busy Canadian airport. Everything seemed normal, the engines roaring to life, the ground crew waving them off. But just moments after takeoff, in a terrifying sequence of events, both planes found themselves in an unimaginable situation, one that would threaten not just their passengers, but the very future of aviation safety. It was 19 seconds after takeoff when the first signs of trouble appeared. The aircraft had barely left the runway, still climbing, when the pilots of both planes were forced to react to something that no one had ever expected. A failure, or perhaps a fault in the system, began to manifest. The flight crew noticed something was wrong, but they had no idea just how close they were to disaster. The atmosphere inside the cockpit grew tense. In that brief, horrifying moment, the pilots of the first Boeing 747 realized they had lost power in one of their engines. The aircraft's climb rate started to slow down as they fought to maintain altitude. The backup systems kicked in, and emergency protocols were activated, but the aircraft was still in danger. The captain and first officer scrambled to assess the problem, but there was no time for deliberation. As the crew worked furiously to stabilize the aircraft, the second Boeing 747, also in its initial climb, was facing its own set of problems. This aircraft, too, was struggling to maintain proper thrust. Another engine failure, another battle for survival in the skies. The pilots of the second 747 realized they were on a collision course with the first aircraft. The airspace was incredibly congested, and these massive planes, with their hundreds of passengers, were now dangerously close to each other. The window of opportunity to avoid disaster was closing rapidly. In the moments that followed, the flight crews worked with unparalleled precision, trying to avoid a mid-air collision that would have been catastrophic. They made immediate radio calls to air traffic control, reporting the crisis and requesting immediate vectoring to separate the planes. The controllers, equally shocked, quickly rerouted the aircraft, giving both crews a narrow window of safety. As the planes soared dangerously close to each other, the pilots of both 747s had to make split-second decisions. With one plane struggling to maintain altitude and the other battling engine failure, the challenge was immense. Every second counted. The pilots, relying on their training and experience, executed coordinated turns, adjusting their climb rates to ensure they would not meet in the sky. The seconds felt like hours as the two massive aircraft soared in tight proximity. Air traffic control continued to guide the pilots, providing vital instructions to separate the planes. But despite their efforts, the two aircraft were dangerously close, both struggling to stay in the air. The risk of collision was terrifyingly real. But, against all odds, the pilots of both aircraft managed to regain control. With engines sputtering and the aircraft's systems struggling to respond, the flight crews persevered. The second Boeing 747 managed to regain some power, and the first aircraft, though still struggling, continued its climb. As the planes slowly distanced from each other, the immediate danger began to fade. By the time the planes reached a safer altitude, the immediate threat was over. The passengers, unaware of the catastrophic situation they had just narrowly avoided, would soon hear nothing but the hum of functioning engines, a sound they had long taken for granted. They would be told that everything was fine, that the crew had things under control. But behind the scenes, there was an enormous sense of relief, for the pilots had just averted one of the worst aviation disasters in history. In the aftermath of the event, the investigation would reveal the full scope of the crisis. Mechanical failures, human error, and a series of miscommunications had all contributed to the near catastrophe. The investigation also uncovered serious flaws in air traffic coordination and plane separation protocols. It was clear that the system, as it stood, was not prepared for the kind of close calls that had occurred. This harrowing experience served as a wake-up call for the aviation industry. It led to new safety measures, stricter regulations, and better systems for managing airspace congestion. The lessons learned from this disaster would reshape the way air traffic controllers and pilots interacted, ensuring that nothing like this would ever happen again. What could have been an unthinkable tragedy was, instead, a lesson in the resilience of aviation professionals and the constant evolution of safety practices. The crews of the two Boeing 747s that day showed incredible bravery and expertise, and their quick thinking saved hundreds of lives. But it also reinforced the reality that in aviation, the stakes are always high, and every second matters.